Story 1. I have 5 nipples. 3 on the right and 2 on the left. I call the unpaired one Lonely Tim. The others do not get names, as they do not need them. They have each other. Story 2. My sweat is extra acidic. I can fully rust guitar strings in a week or two and have eaten holes in 2 laptops where I rest my hands. Both happened within a year of use. Story 3. I have a rare genetic disorder called congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, also known as Ondine's curse. I don't breathe when unconscious or asleep, so I have a tracheotomy and use a ventilator at night. I'm fine during the day though. I don't know. Only about 2,000 people in the world have it. But I'd say the unusual thing about my body is that I can make my tongue go vertical. Story 4. Not me, but my grandma's heart is backwards. It's known as dextrocardia. Essentially, she was born with her heart on the right side of her chest, and it also points toward the right instead of the left. It's never caused her any problems, and she didn't know she had it until she had a heart attack when she was in her mid-80s and needed surgery. She's in her 90s and still going strong. Story 5. Found out during treatment for my back after a car accident that I have an extra lumbar vertebrae. As an already bigger guy, this makes shirt shopping a pain, I'll tell you what. Story 6. When I drink really cold water, it comes up in my ears. I can feel it. It doesn't leak out of my ears, but I can take a cotton swab and it comes out damp. Story 7. I have a lazy eye, also known as strabismus. Not fun, and it wrecks my self-confidence, to be honest. Edit. I had surgery before when I was 3 years old. It worked for about 10 years, then slowly came back. Story 8. I have very poor circulation in my hands, so they are cold all the time. Not just a little cold either. Shockingly cold. I'm also allergic to metal. I also have the sun sneeze reflex and am unable to tan. Story 9. Oh boy, multiple things. Beckwith-Weidman syndrome. Intestines were outside of my body when I was born. Had a tracheostomy for 5 years. Big heart but small lungs. I have size 15 feet. Yes, it's nearly impossible to buy shoes. I am freakishly tall. Everyone in my life says I should be a basketball player. And many more. Story 10. My calf muscles never stop moving. Ever. Even when sleeping or sitting, the muscles twitch and glide under the skin, constantly in motion no matter what. No doctor has been able to tell me what it is or the cause. Interestingly enough, it seems to be genetic because my father's legs do the same thing. Story 11. I was born with a submucous cleft palate. I had 2 uvulas. It wasn't visible on my face at all, but it had such a profound impact on my ability to speak that it was surgically corrected when I was only 6. Even then, I needed over a decade of speech therapy to talk normally. I have over 40 scars on the roof of my mouth. I also have an identical twin sister who just got lucky and didn't have the same issue. I did, however, give her my speech impediment. We were in a journal because before my sister and me, they didn't think that my particular speech impediment could be learned. They thought it had to come from a structural difference. But my sister's palate was normal. She just learned it by learning to talk alongside me. Story 12. I can't absorb much in the way of nutrients. I'm being treated for iron deficiency, osteoporosis that may be calcium or vitamin D deficiency, vitamin K and B deficiency, and sodium deficiency, with a multivitamin to try to cover everything else. I'm famous for overeating but quite slim. Further, I really struggle to build muscle. Last time I posted this, it was suggested it may be celiac disease. I got tested and it came back negative, but just to make sure, I went gluten-free for a couple of months, but my iron levels didn't change and in fact my mental status declined. Some of the deficiencies, sodium and vitamin K in particular, are likely linked to medications I'm on. Story 13. Ridiculously big breasts. They're awful. Everyone reassured me that breastfeeding would diminish them and I would end up with a reasonable size. No, they just got bigger and never went down. Story 14. I've been told by tailors and people in shoe stores that I have the world's worst body. Normally, there are ratios or relations to certain sizes. For example, if your neck size is a certain measurement, your shoulder size and chest size should correspond. It's the same with my feet. The length, width, and arch are not in proportion to each other either. That means no matter what I buy, it will not fit in one of those areas correctly. Story 15. I have an extra set of ribs at the top of my rib cage called cervical ribs. They are just tiny little nubs, but they are long enough to put pressure on the thoracic outlet, a bundle of nerves and blood vessels in the area between the neck and the shoulder, causing thoracic outlet syndrome. Basically, the cervical ribs occasionally compress the nerves, causing shoulder pain, and frequently compress the blood vessels, reducing circulation to my arms and hands, which is also painful. Story 16. Semicircular canal dehiscence means I have an extra hole in the bone around one of my inner ear canals. Because of this, I am super sensitive to sounds, both the usual ones around me and even some internal sounds. For example, I can actually hear my heartbeat or the movement of my eyes, which is pretty odd. Simple sounds like plates clinking or someone speaking loudly can feel way too loud and even physically uncomfortable. This can happen from birth, an injury, or just with age, and there are ways to help manage it if it gets too bothersome. Story 17. I see color radiate from objects. For example, if I see a block of cheese, I'll see a very glowing line of light red around it. It doesn't correspond to anything. Weather, object, nothing. It just happens all the time. Colors are random. Story 18. The ulna bones in both my arms are swapped. Half my left forearm is in my right, and half my right forearm is in my left. This is a birth defect. I can only lift half the weight of an average person my size since one of the spots the muscles in the arms are supposed to attach to isn't there. This pointed towards the radius, giving me a sort of double elbow. Story 19. Not quite my body, but I don't enjoy music. The best I ever get to is not actively irritated. And I've gotten pretty experimental with things. It's just not my thing. My buddy is trying to figure out the patterns behind the intensity of my dislike, and I technically accept the possibility that one day she will uncover some microgenre or experimental music that I do like. But I really wouldn't bet on it. Vladimir Nabokov had similar feelings, which I always have to point to as proof it doesn't mean I'm unable to understand art, beauty, or whatever. Story 20. Visual snow. Think of the white and black static from old-school analog TV. Primarily noticeable in a dark room at night, and also when I close my eyes. Story 21. I am ridiculously flat-footed. I almost stand on my inner ankles. Oh, and I have heterochromia. My eyes are hazel, with the bottom quarter being brown on my right eye. I tell people it is because I'm so full of nonsense. Story 22. I have never been sunburned or even actually burned. Never even needed sunscreen either. I feel the heat, sure, but it's never left a mark and it doesn't bother me as much as it probably should. I like to say I'm fire resistant. Story 23. The left love handle is about 1 inch bigger than the right, even if I'm in shape. It's weird and annoying when tucking in shirts because a random 3 or 4 inches of my waist circumference is fatter than the rest and will spill over and sometimes roll my pants waistband on that side. Story 24. I have 2 small holes at the top of my buttock, right at the end of my coccyx, one on each cheek. It's like I had 2 piercing implants removed. One is more hollow than the other. I was born like that, and I never knew anyone that had something similar. My guess is a malformation of my spinal cord, but I don't know. Story 25. I have polycystic ovary syndrome. I take pills daily to regulate my hormones. Because of it, I had a lot of acne from teenage years to adulthood, which caused a lot of acne scars on my chest and face. Also, my entire chin is covered in bumps from the scars. Story 26. I have median arcuate ligament syndrome, which is terrible for so many reasons, but it's interesting that I can see my pulse in my entire abdomen. When it's really fast, it looks like an alien trying to bust out. Story 27. I'm half club-footed. I'm mostly fine, just clumsy, and I've never been able to wear high heels. I had surgery in 2022, but it hasn't helped all that much. Story 28. I am missing an adult tooth from birth, and I also don't have any wisdom teeth. I am missing certain joints in my fingers, and one of my fingers is much shorter than the rest. It's actually my index finger. But when people want me to show new people, they say, "Show them your thumb." I also learned in school that my torso is unusually long for my body. I have the torso of someone who should be 5 feet 8 inches tall, and I'm 5 feet 1 inch. I have thin blonde eyebrows despite my dark brown hair, and I'm almost hairless everywhere besides my head. I also have a breast disease that makes them swell when I have too much sugar or caffeine, get sick, or sometimes around my menstrual cycle. I'm very abnormal. Story 29. My daughter has a genetic disorder called Klippel-Trenaunay-Weber syndrome, where the entire right side of her body is larger than the left, including internal organs. She has a mild case but was recently diagnosed with leukemia, and doctors do not know if the two are related. She has port wine birthmarks on her face and back. She is an anomaly to her oncology team. Story 30. I can lick my nose if I wanted to, and back in college, I practiced stretching my tongue so much that I could lick my elbow. I can't do it anymore because it was only useful for winning bets and getting free drinks in college. I also used to be able to crack a walnut between my cheeks and thighs. I can't do that anymore, but that's more due to my back getting hurt in a car accident, which prevents working out and also getting older. Story 31. My brain and tummy can't seem to communicate. For example, I will eat dinner and feel so full, like I'm about to burst whether I overeat or not. Then I'll go to bed still feeling that way. I'll wake up the next morning still with that feeling of being overly full, but then suddenly I'll get the feeling of being starving. I don't even get that neutral feeling. Story 32. I have this weird extra toe that only shows up when it's raining. I call it my weather toe. It's like my own personal barometer, but way less useful and a lot more embarrassing. Story 33. My intestines. Every time I've had abdominal surgery, several times, the doctors always tell me that everything is stuck down, to use their terms. This makes my surgeries much longer and harder for the surgeon. Story 34. I do not know where to start with my dozens of health issues. I pass gas from my stomach as I have to put a catheter in and then put in 900 milliliters of soap and water with a gravity bag as I have a paralyzed bowel. They smell much worse than normal gas. Story 35. My fingers on my left hand, which is also my dominant hand, have a joint between the first part and the middle part that can bend very inwards. I can also bend just the very tip of my fingers on both hands forwards. Story 36. My heart beats on occasion. I'll get a few premature ventricular contractions every once in a while, likely related to my gastrointestinal reflux disease, but it's nothing to really worry about. Also, I have one toe with one less joint than the corresponding side. Story 37. The entire left side of my body is messed up. Not literally, but my left eye is slower than my right, my left eyelashes are longer than my right, and my left leg is longer than the other. Story 38. I have 3 hernias. My thumbs are double jointed. I look much younger than I am. This confuses many people of the opposite gender when they like me and find out. Story 39. I was born with shallow kneecaps. The grooves that my kneecaps sit in aren't deep enough to keep them in place, so they can dislocate whenever they want. Strength training has helped with keeping them from fully dislocating, but they still pop and catch regularly. Story 40. I always have floaters in my eyes. I have posterior vitreous detachment. Sometimes they are large and clear and it's annoying. Other times they are small and black and still annoying. Story 41. My ape index, or wingspan as most people call it, is quite unbelievable. I'm 5 feet 6 inches, and my arms are 6 feet 2 inches. The joke growing up was I couldn't ride in a low rider because my knuckles would drag on the ground. Also, it was hilarious watching people try to take things and hold them over my head because the looks on their faces when I just reached up and grabbed them were classic. Also, because I get the same comments every time I post this. I climbed rocks and swam when I was young. Yes, I still play disc golf, but no fighting or boxing of any sort. Story 42. I am a white girl with Irish, Apache, Mexican, and Hungarian heritage, and my ass is very large compared to my waist size. It sounds fun nowadays to a lot of people, but growing up, it was a causal issue for really bad body dysmorphia. Story 43. My immune system works overtime when needed. My wife catches all sorts of colds and sicknesses. I will give her a kiss in the worst of it and only end up with some sniffles at worst. Story 44. I have a pretty deep scar from having chest tubes on my chest. What's wild is I dated a girl who also had chest tubes when she was born, and it resulted in the scar being on her breast. She was super sensitive, but I thought it was cool that we matched. Story 45. My father, who would be 93 if he were still around, couldn't wear a Timex or any inexpensive watch. Within a week or two, they would all shut down. There were lots of theories, but it was suggested that he somehow magnetized the mechanisms. Story 46. No knuckle joint on both ring fingers. These fingers are a segment shorter than they should be, and the missing segment is what would have been the ring knuckle, also known as the base. When I make a fist, there is a dip where there should be a knuckle. There was a game we used to play in grade school, I forget the name, where losing points meant your opponent got to flick a quarter painfully into your knuckles. You had to lay your knuckles flat on the desk. I was never afraid of this game because my missing knuckle created a space that the quarter went into about half the time, since everyone always aimed for the middle. The quarter would just harmlessly lodge under my folded ring finger. No pain. Story 47. I have never met someone even close to the same level of ticklish that I am. It is not like I am ticklish in unusual areas, but it requires almost no contact at all to make me jump at the very least. Story 48. I have polymorphous light eruption, which means when my skin gets exposed to the summer sun, I get a bad heat rash. It usually only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get a rash, and it's almost always on my legs and feet. I have to wear thick zinc sunscreen and reapply it a lot.